Good afternoon. I'm Dina Hirsch, Vice President of the Generations After. Thank you to Daniel Haas, grandchild of survivor, for that moving performance of Kol Nidrei, and to those of you who shared your family pictures of life before November 9th, 1938 with us. You will be able to see the video again at the end of the program and on our YouTube page via a link that will be provided in the chat at the end of the program. Kristallnacht, Crystal Night. What has become increasingly clear to historians is that Kristallnacht is at best a misnomer, a euphemism for a night of horror and destruction. Calling it the night of broken glass isn't any more apt, because so much more than glass was broken. Jewish homes, businesses, and synagogues were destroyed. Cemeteries were desecrated. Hundreds of Jews were killed, and 30,000 Jewish men were arrested, many of whom were later sent to concentration camps. Jewish life in Germany and the annexed areas would never be the same. German officials painted the violence as spontaneous responses of the German populace to the assassination on November 7th of German diplomat Ernst von Rath in Paris by Herschel Grünspan, a 17-year-old Polish Jew. On the evening of November 9th, Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels announced to a meeting of Nazi officials that, quote, the Fuhrer had decided that demonstrations should not be instigated by the party, but they should not be hampered either, end quote. Regional party leaders relayed the instructions to their local offices, where they were widely interpreted as a call for violence against Jews. That violence began erupting throughout the Reich in areas under its control from the late evening and into the early morning of November 9th and 10th. Rabbi Benjamin Buehl, in an article entitled Kristallnacht, Murder by Euphemism, observed, quote, why should we choose to identify the night of initial mass murders with a word that not only ignores everything other than broken glass, but in fact glorifies its results as gifts of crystal clear light to the distorted truths of Nazi ideology, end quote. Why indeed? Perhaps we should follow the lead of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and many scholars who refer to the events of November 9th and 10th as a November pogrom. In today's program, we are honored to have witnessed testimony from a survivor, Susan Warsinger. We are gratified to have three distinguished speakers with us today as well. Dr. Michael Brenner is the Seymour and Lillian Abinson Chair in Israeli Studies at American University and director of its Center for Israel Studies. Dr. Ilana Offenberger is a scholar of history and author of a book describing what happened to the Jews in Nazi Vienna from 1938 to 1945. She teaches in the History Department of the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Lukáš Pribyl is a counselor at the Embassy of the Czech Republic in Washington, D.C., heading the Public Diplomacy Department. He has previously spoken to our Generations After members about his quartet of feature-length documentaries called Forgotten Transports. A link to their fuller bios is in the chat and appears in our October newsletter. Dr. Brenner will speak on the November 9th and 10th events in Germany. Dr. Offenberger will discuss the events in Vienna, Austria. And Mr. Pribyl will talk about the destruction of synagogues in Czechoslovakia in the same period. We will have additional music from Daniel Haas, poetry readings by survivor Rita Rubinstein, 2G Susan Avjian, and 3G Dara Avjian. A brief film clip showing the burning of a synagogue in Buehl, Germany on November 9th, 1938, the final shofar blast by child survivor Arye Ephrath. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeannie Glucksman, and I'm a board member of the Generations After. It is my pleasure to introduce Susan Warsinger to you today. Susan was born in 1929 in Bad Kreuznach, Germany, the eldest of 3 children of Israel and Anne Hilsenrath. Soon after the events of Kristallnacht, Susan and her brother Joseph were sent to France for their safety. She will describe this period for us today. After several relocations, Susan and her brother fled Nazi-occupied France in 1941 and found their way to the United States, where they were reunited with their family and resumed their formal education. Susan earned an undergraduate and master's degrees from the University of Maryland and taught 5th and 6th grade for 27 years in Prince George's County. Susan is a member of the last generation, child survivors of the Holocaust, and has been involved with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum since 1991, translating documents. Once the building was opened, she became a volunteer docent and a speaker for the museum's Speakers Bureau.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. I'm going to talk to you about my experiences from a child's point of view, because that's the way I remember it. I was born in Germany in a town called Bad Kreuznach. It was a small, beautiful little town near Frankfurt and near Koblenz. And my family and I were very happy until Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany in 1933. The first thing that I remember is that my father used to have a wonderful linen store and he made a very good livelihood. But one day he came home and he said, I don't have my store anymore. Of course, my parents didn't explain anything to me at the time because I was very little, and they always wanted to protect me and my brother and my baby brother. So they didn't tell me, but later on I found out that they boycotted his store. And then eventually, he had no more customers and the Nazis took it over. So we had to move a lot. We had to move from a smaller apartment to a smaller place and to even a smaller place. I want to tell you about one of the experiences that I had. Is I was maybe 5 years old at the time, maybe 5.5. I don't quite remember. But what happened was my mother used to tell me, she gave me the privilege of going to the grocery store for the family. So she used to put the pfennig in my hand and she used to say, oh, go buy a loaf of bread. And the grocery store wasn't too far from my house. I had to cross our street and it was safe. And then I had to go through a park. And I went across the street and walked down the steps and got into the park. And as soon as I got into the park, the gatekeeper called me names and he started to scream and he said all kinds of horrible things about me being Jewish. And he said, little girl, don't you ever come through this park again. So I ran home to my mother and she told me that I shouldn't walk through the park, but just go all the way around. So the next time she gave me the pfennig in my hand and she said, oh, buy a bottle of milk, and I was very proud to be helping my family with some kind of chore. And so I crossed the street and I got to the steps and I said to myself, and you're probably knowing already what I'm going to tell you. If I had to go around the park, I had to go a whole block this way and then a whole block the other way and then another whole block the other way. And I said to myself, I'm very tired. And I think you guessed it. Yes, I went down the steps. And as soon as I got to the bottom, the gatekeeper came. And this time he didn't just call me terrible names, but he threw rocks at me. And his daughter was not too far away. She could hear what was going on. And she saw her father, and he was her role model. And So she started calling me names, and she picked up rocks and threw them at me. And here was a young girl who was learning about hatred and anti-Semitism from her father. I never walked through the park again. It was time for me to go to public school. And I don't know if you saw the last picture when in the picture, the show that we had at the beginning, that was me carrying a cone, and the cone was filled with candy, and all the Jewish children, no, not only Jewish children, all the children in Germany, that on their first day of school, at public school, they would get this cone filled with candy to make our life in public school delicious and sweet and wonderful. So I was excited to go to school. But not much longer after I went to school, the teacher started to read picture storybooks to the children. And in those picture storybooks were all kinds of anti-Semitic stories. I don't know if you've seen the book called Der Giftpilz, which it means a poison mushroom. And it had a big picture of it in front of it. And was a mushroom with ugly and was supposed to be Jewish. And she read stories like that to the children all the time. And then the kids knew that I was Jewish, so they started to blame me and make fun of me. And every time I came home, I told my mother I didn't want to go to school anymore. And she said, oh, you have to go to school. Things will get better. And the kids will get used to you and you'll be okay. But it wasn't. It was terrible. However, one day I was extremely happy because there was a law in Germany that said Jewish kids are not allowed to go to public school. So here I was, happy. Of course, our parents, the Jewish parents of Bad Kristallnacht, got together and they hired one teacher to teach all the Jewish kids in one classroom. And we had kids from first grade to ninth grade, and he had to teach us all the subjects. But I was happy because nobody was making fun of me anymore. And then it came to my mother's birthday. My mother's birthday was on November the 10th. And my brother and I, we were sleeping in our bedroom that evening. We were really excited because we wanted to wish our mother a happy birthday the next day. And so just as we were about to go to sleep, maybe it was around 11 o'clock, some bricks and rocks were being thrown through our bedroom window. And my brother is a year younger than I am, and he's much braver. He lifted himself up while I covered myself under my blanket. He lifted himself up and he said, Susie, it is our neighbors that are throwing the bricks and rocks through the window. And he said, our policeman, the civil policeman, was standing at the edge of the crowd like this, and he wasn't doing anything to stop them from throwing these bricks and rocks through the window. I just got a question on the chat, and it says, Susan, how young were you in November? All right, I'll tell you. I'm 92 years old now, so in 1938, I was 9 years old. Anyway, my brother and I were really frightened when these bricks and rocks came through our window. And what I did is I told my brother we need to go across the hall to our bedroom, to our parents' bedroom, and be with them and see and tell them what's happening in our bedroom. But as soon as we got across the hall and we entered their bedroom, there were bricks and rocks being thrown all bricks and rocks were thrown through their bedroom window also. And one of the rocks fell on my baby brother's hand because he was in the crib, but he was okay. But while we were huddling in the bedroom deciding what to do, some of those neighbors had uprooted a lamppost from the street and from Adolf Hitler Platz. That's where we lived. And they took it on their shoulder. They carried it on their shoulder, and they went to our front door. And our front door had this beautiful, it was made out of glass with different colors, green and red and orange, and really pretty. And they smashed through the front door. And as soon as they smashed through the front door, they looted some of the things in our abode. But their main objective was to get to the second floor where the rabbi lived. So what happened, my father said, we need to hide because we didn't know what was going to happen. So we ran up the staircase to the fourth floor, which was the attic of the building. And there were apples there, and the rabbi's family was already up there, but not the rabbi. And I looked out the window to see what was happening. And just as I was looking out the window, they had taken the rabbi of our town and they made him stand with his arms outstretched. And they were holding him. And another person came along, and I think it was maybe a German soldier. I'm not so sure. And they took him, they cut off his beard. And later on, I found out that they hauled him off and took him to jail. And so we were up in that attic for a while, and we were happy because we had the apples to eat it was November. We had stored them up there, and we played with the rabbi's children. And after we came down from the attic, I realized that they had done this to all the families in our town of Bad Kreuznach, that they had burnt down our synagogue, and that there were the few Jewish stores that still were there where Jews could buy merchandise. They were all looted and destroyed. And then I found out that it was not only in our town, but that this happened all over in every city where Jews lived in Germany. And then much later on, I learned that it was called Kristallnacht, and that it was the night of the broken glass. I'll just tell you one more thing, is before the night of the broken glass, before Kristallnacht, the Jews were divided in their opinions about leaving Germany. They figured, well, maybe Hitler's going to blow over, maybe things are going to be all right. But after the night of the broken glass, everybody wanted to leave Germany. Thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Susan.
Hatred by Wisława Szymborska. Hatred. See how efficient it still is, how it keeps itself in shape, our centuries' hatred. How easily it vaults the tallest obstacles, how rapidly it pounces, tracks us down. It's not like other feelings at once, both older and younger. It gives birth itself to the reasons that give it life. When it sleeps, it's never eternal rest, and sleeplessness won't sap its strength. It feeds it, one religion or another, whatever gets it ready and positioned. One fatherland or another, whatever helps it get a running start. Justice also works well at the outset until hate gets its own momentum going. Hatred, hatred, its face twisted in a grimace of erotic ecstasy. Hatred is a master of contrast between explosions and dead quiet, red blood and white snow. Above all, it never tires of its leitmotif, the impeccable executioner towering over its soiled victim. It's always ready for new challenges. If it has to wait a while, it will. They say it's blind. Blind? It has a sniper's keen sight and gazes unflinchingly at the future as only it can. Hatred.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you also, Daniel, for this wonderful music. It's very hard to speak after that, especially after Susan's so moving account. I would have rather listened to you for the whole hour than listening to myself. It also reminded me of my mother, who was a survivor from Dresden. She witnessed the Kristallnacht there. She was a little older. She was born in 1924, and she actually stayed there during the war with the Yellow Star. And she passed away last year at the age of 95. And until almost her last year, she went to schools and told that story. And I think this is so important. And it's so important what you're doing also in this wonderful organization. So I'm here as a historian, and I only have a few minutes to say a few words about the events that led to Kristallnacht in 1938. I think I will concentrate on the day of that, and I agree with Dina of that euphemism, which in Germany you can't, it's politically no longer correct to call it Kristallnacht, and I think here as well. We understand that it is not encompassing all of the brutality of that night. And I want to talk about this date, which is so iconic for German history. This picture here shows November 9th, 1918. That was the day when the Kaiser, the German emperor, left Germany, and the Republic, the Weimar Republic, was established. The first German Republic on November 9th, 1918. We go 5 years from there, and we have another November 9th. That's the infamous beer hall putsch or coup, where Hitler tried to come to power for the first time in Munich. You actually see one of the worst Nazis already 1923 standing here in front of the Munich City Hall. That is Julius Streicher, the editor of the Stürmer, giving his speech. And it was on November 9th, 1923, when Hitler first tried to come to power in Bavaria, and then the plan was to march to Berlin, just as Mussolini had marched to Rome. The putsch failed. He was arrested, and that's already one of the problems we see with the democracy in Germany. The judge convicted him to a very mild sentence, And after less than a year, he was out of prison. It wasn't even a prison. It's an exaggeration to call it prison. He had a very comfortable room where he wrote Mein Kampf. And of course, we know about that infamous book where he put down his political program. So that was his prison. And I'm mentioning all of those dates, 1918, 1923, because there is a connection to November 9th of 1938. And we see here, by the way, November 9th, 1933, at the Munich Odeonsplatz. Those of you who've been to Munich, this is one of the most beautiful 19th century classicists, actually modeled after Florence squares. And now it became the official memorial site for those people who were killed by the Munich police on November 9th, 1923, the Nazis who were killed. Hitler was, by the way, injured at that day, but not seriously. So every year on November 9th, the Nazis made a big gathering in Munich to celebrate what they called their martyrs, their heroes, who had been killed 10 years earlier, November 1923. And that's where we go to November 9th, 1938. November 9th, 1938 is not by chance, falls not by chance on that day. Yes, it is true, a Jew of Polish Jewish parents who were expelled from Germany just before went to the German embassy in Paris and shot a German diplomat 2 days earlier. But preparations were already going on for a major action on that day, 15 years after the failed Hitler coup of 1923. And they all were assembled, Hitler and Goebbels and many of the other Nazi leaders, in the old city hall of Munich. And they took the news of the death of the German diplomat von Rath just as an excuse to start their major action to burn down the synagogues. And as Dina said so eloquently in the beginning, Kristallnacht does not do justice to what happened. Because what is Kristall? Kristall is crystal. It plays a little bit with the image that Jews are rich. They don't only have glass, they have crystal. And what we see on the streets, and you see here one of the big department stores of Munich, for example, was of course the glass from the windows, but much more you see here, some of the 30,000 men being marched to the concentration camps, and of course the burning down of hundreds of synagogues in Germany. And that's why the term pogrom is often used nowadays. I also think it's not an ideal term because it reminds us more of the Russian kind of spontaneous violence against Jews. And that was well orchestrated from above. So maybe one day we'll come up with an even better term. But that's up to historians of maybe the next generation. In Germany, during this night, 1,400 synagogues were damaged, 267 of them totally destroyed. Over 7,000 Jewish businesses were destroyed, and 30,000 Jewish men were incarcerated in concentration camps. Now, I should say, most of them were still able to leave those concentration camps. These were not extermination camps. There were no gas chambers yet. There was no final solution plan yet. The Nazis were still happy if they were able to get a visa and leave Germany. So many of them were able to get out and leave Germany in 1939. But as we know, the doors were already pretty much closed. Very few countries allowed Jews in. And by the start of World War II, less than a year later, it was very hard to get out. And as a special insult, Goering decided that the Jews had to pay a huge amount for the damage the Nazis did to the Jews, but the Jews had to pay for it. And in many ways, and I think we heard that from Susan as well, November 9th, 1938 was a turning point. It was a turning point after acceleration of anti-Semitic measures, which already started the whole year before, including the J in their passports, but also a turning point in the realization that even if until now many German Jews had the illusion, well, maybe we can live as second-class citizens, there was no way of living anymore under a regime that was burning down all of their synagogues and sending tens of thousands of people to the concentration camps. And that was also seen internationally. We see one reaction here in London and in other places. So what I want to stress, actually saying, why did I go back to 1923? After November 9th, 1923, when Hitler's coup failed, many Germans and many Jews thought the danger is over. Hitler did not succeed to come to power. And we have to be very careful in every democracy to think when a coup fails, the danger is not over yet. And the danger was not over. 10 years later, he succeeded and came to power. And I want to end, and now this is not by any logic, but by pure coincidence. It was also a November 9th, 1989, and many of you will remember that, when the Berlin Wall came down. And there were always discussions in Germany, that should actually be the German national holiday because of all the events of that day, good and bad. I'm glad it's not the national holiday, because I don't think that Kristallnacht would make a good national holiday. So they choose another holiday when the official unification came on October 3rd of 1990. But all of those events, the Hitler coup, before that 1918, the fall of the monarchy in Germany, Kristallnacht, and 1989, also the fall of the wall, make this day, I would say, to one day in German history, symbolizing so many different sides of this very complicated history. Thank you so much, and I will stop here.
Thank you to everyone who has already participated in this program, and thank you so much to the Generations After for organizing this. I have to say a special little thank you to my Aunt Micheline, who's also been very instrumental in having me be part of this special program, which I have to say again, I'm just very humbled and honored to be a part of this. So we come here together today to reflect upon and remember the pogrom of November 1938 throughout the Greater German Reich. A question is, are there any lessons that we can learn here some 80 years later? And my research on the Jews of Vienna has revealed that the answer is yes. I would like to propose yes, there is something we can learn. And that is that we always must look below the surface. Beyond the popularized images of broken windows and shattered glass, spreading flames, there are lesser known faces and unheard voices that belong to the individuals who witnessed the pogrom firsthand, individuals whose lives were forever changed due to the pogrom. What exactly did the November pogrom mean for those individuals? For some, it marked the very moment where they would be trapped behind in Nazi territory, separated from family and doomed to an unknown fate. Since the end of World War II, people have wondered, or Austrians have wondered, Austrian Jews have wondered, why is it that some 65,000 Austrian Jews, 1/3 of the population, was unable to escape from the Nazi clutches, while 2/3 managed to emigrate and survive. My research has shown that we can trace this back to the damage of November 1938, to the pogrom. For some, the destruction was so severe that they were never able to recover. And I'd like to share a short presentation that I made here to help demonstrate. Here we see above, this is Leopold Vulcan, one of some 65,000 individuals to be trapped in the Nazi net in Vienna. He was approximately 50 years old, a veteran of the First World War, a business owner, a family man, and a very wealthy man. He and his wife owned a general store with his in-laws in the 17th district of Vienna, and they lived in a large flat just above it. Immediately after the Nazi annexation of Austria in March 1938, it was clear that Leopold and his family were a target for the Germans. His personal automobile was confiscated in April 1938. His wife's jewelry was stolen. How did he respond? He took action. Immediately, he prepared for his family to leave the country as soon as possible. He sent his 2 daughters away to France in the summer of 1938. He registered for emigration with the Jewish community, and he applied for foreign visas. On November 10th of 1938, his hopes to escape were shattered. His chances to escape were greatly inhibited. Leopold is trapped within the Nazi net. He was one of some 150,000 Jews in Vienna to watch as the synagogues burned and places of prayer went up in flames. Here you see there are approximately 100 synagogues and prayer houses across the city that went up in flames or were attacked on the night of November 9 through 10. Leopold's business was one of some 4,083 businesses to be vandalized and looted in Vienna. And Leopold was one of some approximate 8,000 men who were arrested in Vienna and further deported to Dachau and then to Buchenwald. Leopold, fortunately, was not deported, but he was among those arrested, and this lets us know how many others were arrested on this night. Leopold's home was one of some, well, to add to some 2,000 homes just in the first district that were raided and looted. Although Leopold was not evicted from his home on that day, the damage that he suffered to his personal property was immense. He left behind a written testament detailing the destruction from November 10th of 1938. This was a letter that was written to the Nazi Assets Transfer Agency. And in this letter, he documents the destruction. Leopold explained that at 3 p.m. on November 10th, a group of 8 to 10 men appeared at his home. These letters that you see in front of you on the screen are the letters that list the destruction, and I will read the destruction that he notes. 8 to 10 men appeared at his home and the home of his mother-in-law, who was 80 years old. These men proceeded to smash all of the porcelain, glassware, crystal, and lamps. They soiled all of the linens and the sheets. They confiscated his daughter's wedding dowry, a 19-piece silverware set, silver glasses, plates, serving platters. They confiscated a gold watch, a gold bracelet, a typewriter, a Philips radio, food, clothing, leather suitcases. And they proceeded to burn. Yes, they burned books, atlases, and business documents. And, quote, to the greatest pity of all, almost all personal documents and identification papers, end quote. These men left, and 5 hours later, at 8 p.m. on the same day, they returned again to confiscate more items. Meanwhile, on that same evening at 6 p.m., Leopold left his house and was arrested in the 9th district by another group of Nazis who stole all of the documents in his pocket, which included cash and his passport. Leopold was unable to escape from the Nazi realm. Leopold was unable to see his daughters ever again. Some 2.5 years later, he and his wife were deported on one of the first transports. The point of this story is that we remember individuals whose lives were changed by the events of the November pogrom. And in this particular situation, Leopold, all of his documents were stolen or burned on the evening or the day after the November pogrom. And it is very easy to trace back this to be a turning point in which he was ultimately trapped within the Nazi realm. It begs us to question how many others were also trapped at this particular moment in November of 1938. If we look at this and remember that this is a warning sign for genocide. And I want us to remember the names and the faces and the stories of those whose lives were forever changed due to the pogrom. And let us have these images color our memory of this day together with the popularized images of the broken glass. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael and Alana, for your very interesting and informative presentations. I'm Susan Avjian, I'm 2G, and I'm going to be reading a poem by Selma Mirbaum Eisinger. The poem is dated December 23rd, 1941, originally written in German and translated by Jean Bozier-Bear. Selma was deported 1 year after writing the poem and died in a forced labor camp in the Ukraine at the age of 18. Tragedy. This is the worst. You pour yourself out, but no one will know or care. You give your whole self, but have no doubt you'll stream like smoke in the empty air. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Generations After for having me on this panel. And also I have to echo Ilana and thank Micheline Amir, who invited me to speak here. As was mentioned before, this is not exactly my area of expertise. So speaking after Michael and Ilana, I feel a little inadequate, but I'll try to say a few words about the situation in Sudetenland, the border regions of Czechoslovakia, which were a little specific. When I was trying to read up in preparation for this talk, I realized how few studies there actually are on the topic. And unlike the much better documented situation in Germany and Austria, there's very little known and very few figures, exact figures of, for example, how many people were killed in the so-called and incorrectly called Kristallnacht in Sudetenland. And there's no real comprehensive study of what happened to Jewry in these areas. The problem is compounded by the fact that there are actually very, very few witnesses who first survived because many Jews left Sudetenland already before the Munich Agreement, which ceded the border areas of Czechoslovakia to Nazi Germany. Others were murdered in concentration and extermination camps. The few survivors were dispersed all over the world and in most cases have now passed away. And the Germans from the Sudeten region have been expelled after the war. So the memory is very much fragmented and wiped away in a way because the pre-war Sudetenland no longer exists. The Czechs who were there were expelled by the Nazified Germans into the interior. Local Jews and anti-Nazis were imprisoned, deported, murdered, and Germans were deported after the war by the Czechs. So even the few accounts that we have from sometimes the Sudeten Germans, they are tainted by their own suffering after the war and the post-war expulsion, and of course mixed with quite a bit of guilt about the fate of their Jewish neighbors. So there's really not that much to build on in this research. And the paper trail is also quite weaker with the diminishing power of the Czech authorities already before, as the regions were becoming more and more Nazified. There is not that much information. Ilana and Michael mentioned some things that I wanted to talk about, so I need to rearrange my my speech a little bit. But I want to talk maybe about the context in which the psychology of what happened in the Sudetenland, because after the Anschluss in Austria, there was a certain change in the mood of the population. The people in Sudetenland suddenly stopped being afraid. The German population stopped being afraid. And what they were stopped being afraid of was actually the war, because being the border regions, they figured that if there is a conflict between Czechoslovakia and Germany, they would be in the front lines. But after Anschluss and after Munich, they could this pent up tension was actually aired by attacking the Jews to some extent. And the Prague authorities were no longer in charge, so it was much easier for them to do so. Jews started escaping from Sudetenland much earlier, though, because they could see what was happening across the border. There were about 25 to 28,000 Jews before 38. At least 12,000 of them already left before the so-called Kristallnacht. The ones who remained were often either people from mixed marriages or older people. The situation of the refugees from the Sudetenland was also quite difficult in the sense that when they were going into what was left of Czechoslovakia, the authorities there didn't welcome them because they thought they could somehow, by stopping these refugees, they could foment some kind of resistance to taking over the border regions. On Kristallnacht itself, we don't know how many people were killed. We know that at least 35 synagogues in Sudetenland were destroyed. And the way things happened were quite similar to what happened in the Reich, but the context, as I mentioned, was a little different. I think what was the most important thing about this terrible, not night, because it was mostly happening during the day, that it was a breakthrough, because until 1935, but even after that, the violence against Jews was not personal or physical in a way, mostly. They were, yes, they were all over the Reich, and they were deprived of their property, they were pushed out of their jobs and so on, but they were not really physically attacked so much. But this by state organized pogrom was a breakthrough in the sense that suddenly even the bubble the Jews lived in was broken through. Synagogues were destroyed and violated. Personal homes were entered, and suddenly something that they, especially in the border regions, what they the Jews were seeing on newsreels before, suddenly entered their own homes, and this I think is a very important aspect of the development of Nazi policy towards the Jews, because this was really a very decisive moment. I'm running out of time, so I will. Michael talked about the number of businesses and synagogues that were destroyed in Germany, which I wanted to compare. One thing that was quite important in the Sudetenland also was that the synagogues that were attacked during Kristallnacht, so-called Kristallnacht, were often built in the time of the end of 19th, beginning of the 20th century. And they were often Reformed synagogues. They were temples. They very often looked like churches rather than what we imagine as the Eastern European synagogues. They were often built in an Oriental or so-called Moorish style. And they were built in a way as symbols of integration of the Jews into the wider society. And by attacking these very synagogues, this effort of integrating, of being part of the larger whole of both in sense of integrating into Czechoslovakia and among their German neighbors, this was already completely destroyed together with the synagogues. I will probably end here because as we are quite out of time. So thank you so much, and let's hope that this commemoration reminds people of this terrible tragedy, and we will not live through anything similar again. Thanks a lot.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dara Avjian. I am Susan Avjian's daughter. My grandfather was Roman Kent, and I'm third generation, and I will be reading the poem I Am a Jew by Franta Bass. I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people. How dignified they are. Even though I am suppressed, I will always come back to life. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is Daniel Haas again. I want to thank Generations After, as well as my wonderful great aunt, Micheline, as well, for having me as part of this event today. And I will close the program by playing the Prelude Number 1 for cello by Johann Sebastian Bach. Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Susan Miles, and I'm a member of both the Board of Directors of the Generation After and its program. On behalf of the Generation After, I'd like to thank our wonderful speakers and our musical consultant, and we will have the blowing of the shofar by Arye Ephrath. The shofar is normally signaling in the new year, but in this case, we have chosen to play the shofar to commemorate. And thank you all, our wonderful audience, for participating with us, joining with us to commemorate the November program.
Thank you, Arye. Arye is a child survivor of the Holocaust and did a tremendous job in that symbol of hope and remembrance. Thank you all, and Ephraim, if you will cue up the video once more. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.